Hello everyone, it's the Lit Girls with
Ava,
Emma,
and Colby. From your local AP Lit class, today we are discussing the poem Icarus by Edward Field.
This poem is actually inspired by the Greek myth Icarus, so I'm going to read the story just to give some background context. Daedalus and his son Icarus fashioned wings of feathers and wax in an attempt to escape from prison by flying across sea. Before their flight, Daedalus warned his son not to fly too close to the sun, but, caught up in the experience of flying, Icarus ignored the warning and soared upward. The heat of the sun melted the wax, the wings fell off, and he plunged to his death in the sea.
So first we're going to read the poem before we analyze it. Only the feathers floating around the hat showed that anything more spectacular had occurred than the usual drowning. The police preferred to ignore the confusing aspects of the case, and the witnesses ran off to a gang war. So the report filed and forgotten in the archives read simply, drowned. But it was wrong. Icarus had swum away, coming at last to the city where he rented a house and tended the garden. That nice Mr. Hicks, the neighbors called him, never dreaming that the gray, respectable suit concealed arms that had controlled huge wings, nor that those sad, defeated eyes had once compelled the sun. And had he told them, they would have answered with a shocked, uncomprehending stare. No, he could not disturb their neat front yards. Yet, all his books insisted that this was a horrible mistake. What was he doing aging in a suburb? Can the genius of the hero fall to the middling stature of the merely talented? And nightly Icarus probes his wound, and daily in his workshop, curtains carefully drawn, constructs small wings and tries to fly. To the lighting fixture on the ceiling, fails every time and hates himself for trying. He had thought himself a hero, had acted heroically, and dreamt of his fall, the tragic fall of the hero. But now rides commuter trains, serves on various committees, and wishes he had drowned. So first, we learned in AP Lit it's recommended to first paraphrase the poem as it shows an understanding.
Okay, so I'm going to paraphrase the first stanza. So we really just talked about how the police and the witnesses were ignoring the evidence that was pointing to something else, and we talked about how they were just trying to ignore him as if he was just every other person, and that's not how he saw himself. He saw himself coming from greatness and all of these gods. So he had this big fall from grace to a normal life.
Mm-hmm. And then for the second stanza, we kind of talked about how he just he never told anyone because he felt like maybe he was a failure to himself, and then so he didn't want to be seen as failure as others, and also just that no one would believe him maybe. Talking about he didn't want to disturb their neat front yard, so he didn't want to disturb their normal lives with this crazy story of what he did. And he just he felt like he was questioning himself, how did I fail this miserably?
Right. So then it moves on to the last two stanzas. We see the word choices probes and nightly, so he continues to try and fix, and he keeps trying to make these wings, he keeps trying to fly, but he continues to fail, which causes a lower self-esteem, and he falls lower and lower from his stature as a hero, and he moves on to Field moves on to the second stanza where he thought himself a hero, had acted heroically. He thinks he's such a hero, but now he's so average and he's disappointed in himself, and he even wishes he had even died.
Yeah.
So should we move into the point of the story or the devices?
I think we should do devices first and then message.
So we can go on how the devices built upon the message.
You already started with kind of the diction and stuff, so I'm just going to build off that for you.
I definitely see that.
There's a lot of, first of all, it's obvious there's a lot of modern talk. I mean, this is supposedly playing off a story that took place in, I don't know, whenever Greek mythology took place in, but they're using words like police, gang war, rented a house, that's not really something they did.
And then at the bottom it's commuter trains.
Yeah, a suburb, commuter trains, committees, that, all that stuff is more modern language, so it's kind of adapting the story to fit into our world more than what he actually would, Icarus actually would have lived in.
Right.
And then there's also there isn't too much of it, but there's a little bit of diction about the main one that you point this out, probes his wound, which kind of plays into
that leads like into imagery and stuff.
Yeah, it
Right.
he keeps like, and normally you think of when a wound, you think of you're tending it, you're taking care of it. Probing literally means like to poke it and to like make it worse almost.
So he just keeps like
I don't
rethinking
like
it,
that.
and I think he just gets more disappointed in himself, like the more he thinks about it.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, so that it just kind of paints a picture like if you literally can imagine someone having a cut in their arm, just like poking at it and like
Ew, it's kinda
keeping
gross.
it
He's
like
not fixing it the same way. He's not moving.
It's kind of
on.
like, he's like not in the right mind. Like,
Yeah.
why would you like be like picking at like a
No.
wound? It's kind of like
Yeah,
gross.
he's literally stuck in his own head, or not even on his own head, but he's stuck on his failure.
Yeah,
Right.
And
he's
can't.
stuck on this one thing and he can't move on.
He can't
the
let it
same way
heal.
his wound isn't healing.
Yeah, he can't let it heal because he's like making it worse.
Mhm.
And then I thought we also discussed. I feel like there was another like there's a lot of sad
Mhm.
diction, like
Yeah,
forgotten.
a lot of like it just like all this like not disturbing, but like depressing
Yeah.
diction leads into that overall tone of like being depressed and just like a cloud of like
Right.
sadness.
Right. Yeah, because, like, I don't know. Like, obviously he's, like, disappointed in himself, but he's, like, genuinely, like, mentally, like, severely affected by this. Like, he's
Yeah.
very, like, he has sad, defeated eyes, and he hates himself for trying and wishes he had drowned. Like, those are very
really benefit
strong,
from some therapy.
they're strong words.
Yeah. Which it all kind of plays into, and we're gonna talk about this later more, but it kind of plays into like the overall message that
That's
like
what I was
when
thinking.
you go for something that's like your main goal in life and then you fail, what do you do afterwards?
Right,
Like what are you
sad.
left with almost? That's kind of what I feel like the author is playing into a bit.
That's
And then
sad.
It's very deep.
It's sad.
And then obviously there's also a lot of like illusion,
Uh-huh.
like
Well,
back
oh,
to
yeah.
yeah,
obviously
like back to
illusion.
his like original story.
Right, and how it, like, but then, like, the key points is how it differs. Like,
Mhm.
obviously it differs, but, like how,
there's a,
like, he lives. So,
like
like,
there's a nod to his story, like with the wishes he had drowned and like just everything about his like fall from grace.
Mhm.
right. And, like, when we read this story, we looked a little more in detail to it, like, he was known as, like, he was, like, the fool, like, of greed. And, like, it shows, like, maybe even could be, like, a play on how, like, if you're too greedy. But I feel like this poem is more, like, about ambition and goals. Like, I don't
Yeah.
think it's necessarily about, like, how he didn't listen to his father.
Yeah, the original story, I can definitely see greed, but with like the poem, I'm
Mhm.
definitely more seeing ambition and failed
Yes.
Right.
like reaches.
We also talked about the structure a bit.
Mm,
And with this poem, the first two stanzas are, I mean, they're pretty long, and then the last two
Right.
get they're
They're, like,
shorter,
very
like
short.
half the
Ooh,
size
yeah.
of the first two. And so we talked about that, like maybe it could symbolize his life, like going from this giant thing, like this like great, I don't know you would
He,
call
like,
it.
just thought
This, like,
his
great-
life was so,
Yeah, it's like great
important.
life, and then to like it gets like reduced to
Yeah.
like living in a suburb and like kind of being boring.
Yeah.
Right.
Like it could represent that, and or maybe it could also represent like how he thought of himself, like he thought of himself this big person.
It's
and
like
now
maybe
he's,
like his self-esteem like shrinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought about when we first talked about this like a funnel, like how you pour everything in and then it like all drips out. I think he's like reaching the stage where it's like only a few drops every once in a
Right.
while. Like he's like very much not there.
Like,
he's
yeah,
there
he wants-
physically,
he
but
wants
not,
to
not
die.
there mentally.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like, speaking of how, or like we were talking about how he like has such a good view. He once had such a good view of himself, but like we never really see point of view of those around him. Like,
No.
he talks so much about he's such a hero and he can't destroy their front yards, but like it's kind of just from his point of view. Like, it makes you wonder if he was the one who just thought he was this great hero, or if
It seems very like egocentric.
yeah, very much. Because
Like-
we were noting on greed. It's
Unreliable.
not really. He's just kind of self-centered in a way.
Yeah, like unreliable narrator kind of thing. You can't tell. If
Right.
it's,
Yeah. Because like.
we kind of sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. You go.
Okay. We kind of touched on this a bit, but like I want to talk about the images a little bit more.
Right.
Yeah.
With like you just like like the main thing, I keep going back to this, but like the Probst's rune, like that third
that
stanza,
one's
I feel like
it's very strong.
is the most like imagery one, because you're like, this is a guy who's like literally trying to recreate what he did, and he keeps failing because like he can't move on, and it goes back to like the probing the wound thing. You keep touching it, it's never gonna heal.
I feel like if you go, sorry.
No, it's okay.
You can go.
I was gonna say that I think that leads us more into like the message of every time you fail, you want to keep trying. But I think for him, it's just getting repetitive.
Right.
It's not like really a good thing.
I think that's very interesting because like usually when you fail, people are like, oh, you have to keep trying. Yeah. But then here we're reading like he needs to move on. So it's like, when does it get to a certain point where you have to like you have to move on?
Or find
I
a
find that was
goal or
really
dream.
interesting.
Yeah.
But sorry, like stanza by stanza, like it's like the crime scene, and then he had swum away, coming last. Like it talks about the garden, like Emma was saying. There's a lot of imagery, and then it's like the nice Mr. Hicks. It describes him then, how he like becomes an average guy, and then but then he's sick of being like average, and he keeps trying, and then he eventually reaches that point in his depression where he wants to die. Like it could be like it's kind of that cycle. He just can't get out of it. Like he knows he has to give up, but he can't. And like we see he needs to give up, but he can't let go of that hope of his life being meaningful.
We also touched on how he's like egocentric. I think that's also because he has, from the like viewpoint of this poem, he has no friends. He has no one telling him to stop because he's hurting
like his
himself.
Dad is also gone. Like,
he's all alone in this world that he knows nothing about, and he's not making any moves to make any friends.
Right, well, it's like he's on committees in Nice Mr. Hicks, but they're not necessarily like prominent people to him. Like
there's no like
he doesn't
there's
care
no
about
dinner parties that he's going
to.
to.
Like it doesn't say anything about a family or about anything.
I want to try and transition into what we think he's trying to touch, the author's trying to touch about, like what this means for maybe the modern world.
So how
because he does
elements
make it
develop,
modern, like what's the point
of
doing that? So for me, when I kind of read it, like I kind of assumed, like I said this earlier, but like reaching for something, like your main goal, and then failing, and then having to live with that, like the aftermath of that, and maybe the point of him doing it like in a modern setting is kind of just because it's harder for people like now to reach their goals and ambitions, because like maybe just because like stuff like flying with wings and feathers and wax isn't possible anymore.
That's what we talk about. Like it's so fantasy like, and it's like you're a superhero, like you can do anything, but in this world, like we have jobs, we have bills, we have like I don't have flying wings.
Like you either to like sometimes like people to reach their goal you have to be able to risk everything, and people can't do that, or they do that and then they fail and then they have nothing. Like what I feel like in our world
there's a lot more like to lose.
Maybe
where he came from, there was like he got everything like handed to him. There was nothing really to lose. But now he has a life. He has a lot to lose.
Kind of sad, because like he literally like the contrast between like mythical Greek and like they all wear like I don't know, they all wear togas and like grass, like what are their head things?
I don't know.
And then he switches to the gray respectable suit and he's sad, and it's like it just kind of makes you realize like reality is kind of sad. It's not all wax wings and flying to the sun. So like I think like making it modern, it just kind of makes it a bit more tragic and realistic and relatable. Like
I feel like people reading this who like maybe have lived life or are living a life like this, they would like be like, oh, I'm like this guy.
I feel like
and then that could like maybe make them like it just like
change.
Or not even change, but just
so it's like inspiring.
It's a way to like just like people can like relate to it, making it into a modern setting, you know, like they can connect to it easier.
Right.
I really thought that his touching on the modern world was like the saying that comes from like the original story is don't fly too close to the sun.
Right.
And I think he really like brings it up in this poem. Like
for sure.
If you like continue to try, you're gonna keep failing if you don't have the right things.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that was the Lit Girls. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for our episode on short stories.